I'm Bob Dean. I'm pleased to be here with you today. I'm actually from Chicago and spending a lot of time in Houston right now. But it's really cool to be here in Maryland with a lot of folks I've gotten to know over the last few months and getting to know more here today. Now, I'm here. Pam, isn't this a learning symposium we're in today? Okay. So I'm here to talk about learning. But I'm also here to talk about change. You heard this morning in our opening session a lot of references to the change that's going on in the profession. And I believe that learning should be about change. Change in people and change in businesses. So earlier in the spring, I actually co-authored an article for MACPA's Statement magazine, and it's titled Learning and Change, Creating Transformational Development Experiences. And everybody who's talked today about the need to develop is really talking about the need to change ourselves, because I believe that learning should be a life-changing experience. Now, Tom Hood, who many of you know and you'll hear more from today, he has a statement that he loves to talk about today, that learning must be greater than the rate of change. Now, that really raises the bar. And for those of you in this audience who are learning leaders or who have something to do with learning in your organization, think about that one. Learning has to exceed the rate of change. Now, I'm a CPA. I spent the first 7 years of my career auditing in a Big 8 accounting firm. And it was incredible foundational experience for me. But I'm also a chief learning officer. I have a passion for helping people develop and for helping organizations change. But during my career at Ernst & Young and Grant Thornton and another firm in professional services, I always knew we have a problem here. We invest in a lot of training, but there's a problem. And the problem is on this graph on the screen. That when people attend a classroom training program, and I will now update that to include perhaps a webinar or a virtual class, a live online class, the statistics about knowledge retention, and this is research that's been done for years, so this is cumulative research. After 48 hours, retention has dropped to less than 40%. It's 33%. Now, as someone who stood up in front of classes, as many of you all have over the years, and prepared to deliver a great program, that's pretty humbling. That the reality is I'll be lucky if people are retaining a third of what I cover. But the story gets worse. Within 3 weeks, the retention has dropped to less than 20%. So what does that mean? It means we have a lot of what I call learning scrap. Scrap is a term that everyone in the manufacturing industry knows. If you have a lot of scrap in your manufacturing process, you're probably not going to be a successful company. You're probably going to go out of business because that scrap is not part of finished product. Well, that's all learning scrap. And we have a real problem, and have had for a number of years in the industry, because we have too much learning scrap. So about 6 years ago, after many years as a learning professional, I felt like I want to do something about this problem. I really am passionate about doing something about this problem. And so I thought, I went out of the box and I said, there's a book that's just been published called The Experience Economy. And it's all about the world we're living in. It's all about the world we consume in and how we're spending more and more of our money on experiences. And the book, which was written originally in 1999, the one on the left, has been updated last summer by Harvard Business School Press. And the models and frameworks of the book, which I was certified in 6 years ago, are the same. but what's been updated are the examples of companies providing experiences to their customers. Now, one of the models that's most valuable in this book, in chapter 1, is called the progression of economic value. And before I talk you through this briefly, I'd just like to ask you, we have a whole bunch of people here at this Innovation Summit, and something drew you here. You either go every year, or maybe you saw some work on the web, some social media that draw you here. How many of you came here, honestly, because you felt this was going to be a great experience today? Please raise your hand if you would. Okay, I'm looking at maybe half the audience, if not more. So, Peter, that's good because they're not just here for CPE. They're here to have a very good experience. So I hope you can relate to this. I'm going to quickly walk you through this progression of economic value. This morning, Tom talked about the agrarian economy. And our economy used to be driven by commodities, by what was produced on the farms, vegetables, fruits, and it was a huge part of our economy. But along came the Industrial Revolution, and we moved to an economy based on goods. And that lasted a number of years, and it became the driver of our economy. Well, I've lived, as many of you have, to the service economy, where goods became commoditized and they were turned into services. And we, working in accounting firms and consulting firms, you can all relate to that because we're in the service business. But the best service organizations are focusing on how to create experiences for their customers, because that can be a differentiator. And ultimately, if you can get to experiences, then the final place to get is transformation. And when I talked about life-changing experiences, that is transformation. A life-changing experience is something that changes you forever. Now, let me give you an example of the experience economy. And it's one that I think a lot of you can relate to. About 20 years ago, a smart guy at Starbucks, started Starbucks, and he realized that he could create an industry that had been focused on commodities, beans, coffee beans, that had then moved to goods, the Folgers can on the shelf at the grocery store, that ultimately then was charging more for the service of pouring the coffee in a restaurant. But ultimately, could we get to a $4 to $5 cup of coffee at Starbucks where people come every day or several times a week and they have the Starbucks experience? And that experience can be because the barista knows exactly what they want every morning, or because they carry their Starbucks card on the top of their wallet. Even this morning, as I got up in the Sheraton Hotel here, lo and behold, what was sitting there but a Starbucks pouch so that I could have my Starbucks experience. Not quite the same as being in the store, but in the hotel room. So that's an example of the experience economy in action. We're all part of it, because even if you're not a Starbucks customer, you're aware of what they're doing and how successful they've been. So how can we apply this to learning and development? Well, when I went through the certification, and this for me was a life-changing experience, being certified in the experience economy, ultimately we were asked to create our own progression of value for learning and development. And the boxes you see here are the substitute for the commodity, the good, the service. In effect, let's start with learning resources. What is a learning resource? Well, it could be a binder, or worse yet, it could be a PowerPoint deck that you request at the end of a webinar and it gets emailed to you. Not likely your life is going to change because of the PowerPoint deck. So that's a commodity. Ultimately, as we move up the ladder to off-the-shelf courseware, which could be generic e-learning, for example, and then to customized programs, where a program leader and designer customize a generic program for a unique audience in a unique firm. Now we're starting to move up the value chain to impact. But ultimately, it's about continuous learning experiences, as Peter was talking about a moment ago, becoming a lifelong learner. Again, this is a focus of the Horizons 2025 output. And for those who can get there, what we really should be focusing on is not CPE, but transformational development experiences where we really do change. Now, the axes around the side are the things that need to be done to get there. I want to focus in on just one of these, and that is the top line, the level of learner engagement. I go back in my learning days to the days of flip charts and overhead projectors and transparencies and handouts. Now, we've come a long way since then. I'm not sure it's all good, because we are very dependent on PowerPoint. And PowerPoint is a lean back experience. It's kind of like being at the movies and just sitting back and soaking it in. And what we need to do is design more learning experiences where people are leaning forward, they're engaged. Everybody lean forward right now. Would you just lean forward a little bit? Okay, that's making me feel like you're more engaged. Whether you are or you aren't, you look like it. And ultimately, jumping into the learning process, whether it be through action learning, where you have to go off and work on a project as a result of the learning experience, or whether it be through something I'm really excited about right now, collaborative learning. Because another one of the things Tom Hood has said in the last year that I think is very provocative is that although we all know we learn from experience very well and have for years, we can actually start to learn through collaboration and learn faster and more than we can learning from experience. Now, just to validate that the experience economy, which is not a learning book, is not the only place where we're focused on experiences. The book in the lower corner is called The 6 Disciplines of Breakthrough Learning. It came out in 2006, so it's only been out 6 years, and it's become a handbook for a lot of training leaders in organizations. And you'll notice D2 up there, if you can read it. D2 says design complete experiences, not events. So again, a focus on the need for lifelong learning experiences and designing learning experiences. Well, you might be wondering, well, how do we do that? That's not easy. And you're right, it's not easy, which is why we still default a lot of times to events, whether they be one-day classes or webinars. And ultimately, that's on the far left side, the face-to-face classroom, the live virtual classroom, the webcast. These are live events. We're also seeing a lot of on-demand learning. E-learning became hot in the mid-90s and into the next decade, but it hasn't really achieved the promise that we were hoping for. It may someday. It could be that many of our learners and audiences were not ready for it, and we may be more ready now. But there's a couple of channels on here that are really emerging as ones that are very promising for improving learning and driving change in people. And those are, on the far right, the learning resources that include books, podcasts, videos, and blogs. How many of you have ever heard of Salman Khan? Okay, we've got about 7 or 8 people. What do you know about Salman Khan?
From his TED Talk in his learning institute for the junior high school staff.
Okay, so you've seen the TED Talk. And actually, that's probably the best way to see him. But he does have something called the Khan, Khan, Academy that you can find on the web. And what Salman Khan is doing, and his TED Talk I just saw myself last week is a great example, is he's using video, YouTube-like video snippets to teach people on all kinds of topics, including very technical topics like physics, or if you want to brush up on your geometry, you can go watch a Khan Academy video on this. And a lot of learning professionals are looking at this and saying, this guy's just a business person, and he's figured out a better way to engage learners and to transfer knowledge than we have after years of focusing on events. The other one channel that I think is going to become very, very important, and we heard the word many times this morning, is collaboration. We need more collaboration. We need to do it more in an environment like this, which is not easy. And we need to do it more online. So collaborative learning channels are going to be very important. So ultimately, I hope I'm leaving you with a feeling that if you are sometimes concerned with the impact that your learning is having in your organization, I think there is hope that we can take that research that shows that line going to the bottom, and we can turn it around by focusing on follow-through, support, and continuous development experiences. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is make learning stick. Make it stick. So here's the progression of learning value. We're trying to achieve that top level, and I wish you all good fortune in your endeavors in this area.